Welcome to Zoom into a Career. It's a series that has been designed to help students explore career pathways and learn about other people's worlds. And so with us today, we have Andrew Mohl, and he is the General Service Administrator for the Vancouver Fleet Management Center. That's a mouthful. And I'm Terry Pablo, and I'm the Career and Technical Education Director for Yelm Community Schools. So Andrew, tell me what the heck that means. What do you do?
Well, so I'm with the General Services Administration, so it's a federal agency. So I am not an administrator, but I am a fleet manager. And my Fleet Management Center, or FMC as we call it, is based in Vancouver, Washington. I manage about 8,600 vehicles from sedans and cars all the way up to semi-trucks and trailers, from basically the Pacific coast of southern Washington, or the southern half of Washington, all the way down into northern California, and then as far east as western Wyoming. I've got a little sliver of western Wyoming. We serve tribal customers, we serve federal agencies. We provide them the vehicles that have the plates that say U.S. government on them so that they can do what they need to do, because we want the Forest Service worrying about forests, not about how to buy cars or get cars and trucks to get traveling out in the forest. So we're the experts when it comes to the wheels, and we let them be the experts when it comes to the forests.
So would I be oversimplifying it if I said you're the auto shop for basically federal agencies?
We're the enterprise rent-a-car for federal agencies, I think would probably be the better way to see it. We do manage the maintenance and the purchasing, but we buy those cars and then we provide them to the federal agencies. They pay us for those cars so that they don't have to buy them themselves or lease them themselves.
Gotcha. Okay. And so how'd you get to a job like this? How'd you end up there?
So, well, I'll give you the origin story because I think I've got a very non-traditional educational background and work background. So graduated high school and went into the Army. I actually joined the Army at 17 years old and spent 12 years in the Army. Ended up having to get out because I injured my back after a deployment to Iraq. While I was in the Army, I worked in transportation and logistics. So I was basically I drove a truck for no, I mean, the easiest definition, but I worked my way up from just being a driver into being a driver's trainer, and then being a squad leader and a manager of a truck company or in a truck platoon. So I got to manage those dispatches and vehicles going in and out and managing the maintenance. That parlayed into, in my last couple of years of service, I was the fleet manager for the Fort Lewis Transportation Motor Pool, now Joint Base Lewis McChord. But I've managed all of the non-tactical vehicles, or like plain, like vans, pickup trucks, and things like that aren't painted Army green. I manage those for Fort Lewis. While I was in the Army, I was able to complete a bachelor's degree and started work on a master's degree. And I was doing that through night school and evening classes. So as I got out of the Army, I was approached by, actually the General Service Administration provided us vehicles in the Army.
Right.
So my fleet representative actually approached me and said, hey, we would love to have you on board at GSA, since we know you're getting out, we know you're educated, and you meet our requirements. Would you be interested in a federal internship? Oh. And so I actually went into a federal internship with GSA right after I got out of the Army in 2006. And I actually didn't go into vehicle fleet management. My education was in business administration, emphasis in finance and accounting. And I turned that, I ended up going to work for them in commercial real estate. So not only does GSA provide vehicles to federal agencies, they also provide real estate to federal agencies. So all of the federal buildings, leased office spaces. I think a good example, we have GSA houses Fish and Wildlife Service on the St. Martin's University campus. So they lease space for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they also lease space for the Olympic National Forest down on Black Lake Boulevard near the Olympia Mall or Capitol Mall. So, and then after about, I would say, another 11 years of doing the commercial real estate, the fleet guys approached me again and said, would you be interested in being a fleet manager? And that was about 3.5 years ago. And so I ended up taking the Vancouver fleet management job, and I've been doing that for the last 3.5 years.
Okay, so you've said Vancouver a few times, and we're in Yelm. And so aside from the fact that a lot of us are working from home and remotely, how do you live in Yelm and work in Vancouver?
Well, we are very telework oriented, or mobile work, I think is probably the better situation. As having the geographic area that I have, I've got a very, a big distance that I have to cover. I've got a field office in Richland, Washington, and a field office in Boise, Idaho. And I have employees that work there that I have to manage. So we are very technically proficient. I actually have, I can show you, I've got a laptop provided by the government. I've got a cell phone provided by the government, and I have my own iPad that I use that's connected to all of our systems that I can use for work, that allows me to work pretty much in any environment. I can sit in a car and be fully connected to all of our systems and have web chats or video chats or phone calls with any of our customers, any of my employees, or any of my leadership, pretty much at any time. We've been pretty well connected, I would say, and had mobile work options for about the last decade. And so I'm very well versed in that. So I get to work, the job provides me the opportunity to work from home 50% of the time, sometimes even 60 or 70% of the time. So I only have to actually drive down to Vancouver 2, maybe 3 times a week if absolutely necessary.
Wow. Okay. So this is a normal procedure for you, having sites out and about across the state and into other states, and managing people. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. How is it, or what do you find challenging about managing people who you don't see every day? We think about, you work with people and you work in teams and they're right there. Your teams are really spread out. So how does that work for you?
It's all about the organizational culture, I think, in that type of an environment, and people have to know what they're getting into. It's definitely something that is, it's tough, and it can have its barriers, and there has to be a lot of trust. So as a manager, I have to evaluate metrics and data on a daily basis to make sure that my team is actually doing their job and doing the work that they need to do. So we manage things like I can go in and look and see that they're doing billing adjustments and things of that nature, or assigning vehicles or terminating vehicles, or ordering new vehicles to replace older vehicles that an agency might be leasing from us. So I can see that they're doing that work. So I use a trust but verify type of a mentality of management. We also, there's a lot of phone calls, a lot of phone call check-ins, or we use Google as our email platform. So there's a lot of Google chat or video chats. We don't use Zoom, but we use an Adobe Meeting Connect system. And we have regular webinars or telephone meetings, standing weekly team meetings. And then I have, given the situation that's going on right now with the coronavirus, we have a daily, just a daily chat check-in where we talk about any kind of issues or anything like that that's going on. But yeah, it's as a manager, you have to be very trusting. I think probably the biggest difficulty is when you have to onboard a new employee. I can be there physically for about a week when I'm traveling, but then I have to trust my employees to actually train those new employees and bring them up and get them up and running.
Yeah, I was going to say that trust is obviously a big one. And, thinking about a student and, their experiences right now, how would a new employee start to to show you trust? Or what would be things that you would be looking for that showed those kinds of characteristics?
It starts in the interview process. I've got a pretty significant battery of questions that I ask anybody that wants to come work for me. I've got about a dozen questions that are regular questions that I've asked from a bank of about 25. And they're questions that are designed to see how they work with other people, and questions that are designed to how they work independently. Because a lot of the work that my staff does is, well, we are a team and we help each other out. A lot of the work is independent. You have your own customers, you have your own vehicles, and you have your own vendors that provide a service that you have to manage. So I think that's the first part in establishing or evaluating that trust is, in an interview, is this person being honest with me, and is the stuff that they put on their resume, do they really have that experience? So that's number one. And then number two is, we do take a hand-holding approach, a more of a daily check-in for a new employee when they're starting out. And then I always have, for the days that they are in the office, or they always, the first year normally on board is they are in the office 100%. They don't get the option to work at home unless there's an emergency. But then there's always a body there with them. Someone is there to help them answer questions, or whatever situation might come up, and just provide them guidance. And then I have regular meetings with those with new employees. I meet with them once a week. I've got regular standing bi-weekly meetings with all my other employees that work for me. So we chat, just general chat. That's not necessarily about work or anything like that. It's like, hey, what's going on? What can I do to support you? What can I do to make your job easy? So that's the way we build that trust and build those relationships, is clear communication and honesty.
Yeah, I would say that is really strong mentorship and really strong way that not only is the new person building skills, but also the person who's an established employee who is developing their leadership and developing their management qualities for you as an employee in your organization too.
I think one of the big things that I take on, or at least one of my management styles, is servant leadership. If anybody that's watching or hearing us chat, look up servant leadership and look up what it is. But it's really about taking care of the people that work for you and recognizing that they're the ones that make you successful. I can't be successful if they're not successful. And then my job is essentially to train my replacement. There's other things that I want to do and other places I want to go. And so my job is to train my replacement, or make sure that any one of my employees could step into my job if I'm gone tomorrow. And so that's kind of the focus that I take in managing them. So I do give them leadership opportunities and management opportunities, or special projects to manage, and things like that to take on, that really get them that exposure to being a leader and being a manager. Because contrary to what you might hear, leaders aren't born. Leaders are created.
Yep. So speaking of that creation, what can students do now to start developing those skills?
I would say work. Get a job. Even if it's there are things, employers especially are looking for someone that has work ethic, and the desire to be there and the desire to be part of a team. So no matter what the job is, I started at 14 years old. I was delivering newspapers for the Tri-City Herald in Kennewick, Washington. I sold golf balls. I was able to go down to a golf course and pull old golf balls out of ponds and out of fields, and I cleaned those up and I sold them to guys. So a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit in that regard. And then I ended up working for Burger King for about a year. I lived in Meridian, Idaho, and I worked for Burger King for about a year when I lived down there. And then I ended up coming back to Washington and I worked for Pizza Hut. So I worked the fast food jobs, and I worked the dirty, grimy jobs. I drove a truck for an agricultural farm at the age of 18 years old. My first couple of years in the Army Reserve, I drove a truck for a farm watering roads during harvest season. So having that experience and having that work experience, I would say, and stick-to-itiveness for a job. Don't just hold a job for 2 weeks and say, yeah, I'm done. Have something and have it for a good couple months, and don't, be on time. Do the dirty work that a manager may ask you to do, and build that resume and build that experience. I think one of the other things is give back. Managers want to see someone that is involved in especially on the government side. If you're looking to go into government work, part of the big thing about government work is giving back. We don't get paid the greatest, but we get great benefits and we get great work schedules, I would say. And that allows you to do other things. So many of you may know me as the franchise head coach for Yelm Tornado Youth Football and Cheer. It's almost like a second full-time job. And I do that because I love it and I love to give back. So having things like that on your resume and getting into it is a number one key. Number two is seek out education and seek out opportunities. With that, and it doesn't have to be formal education. I did probably about 300, before we had online schooling, I did correspondence courses where I got a book and I had quizzes that I had to mail in that got graded on Scantron forms, and I got a score back, and I either had to A, retake it, or B, I passed, I could move on to the next one. So I did, in the Army, I did about 300 Department of Defense correspondence courses in addition to college work. I got rid of all the books that I had. I recycled them all because I just don't want to carry around that paper. But now all that stuff has gone online, and there are so many different educational opportunities. Harvard Business School has free online courses. I believe Purdue offers free online courses, and they're simple courses, and they are courses that will build your portfolio of knowledge, that you can say when you're in an interview and you get the question, you can say, yeah, I have experience working with Excel. I have experience doing this. As a matter of fact, I've received 14 clock hours of training on how to use the Microsoft Office suite, and I'm familiar with whatever they may be asking about. That's, I think, the biggest thing. Education and growth, seeking that out. Those two steps, working and volunteering and seeking out education, whatever that education might be to provide growth, is going to be what gets you in and sets you above someone else that may not be doing that.
Yeah, what came to my mind was initiative and that self-driven, of the things that you're interested in. I think that, not only, and you brought up your community service and your coaching and the impact having there. Students gain a lot of skills in being in sports, but sports aren't the only thing that we have in our community. And there's a lot of different organizations and clubs where they can give back, and they can get involved with Rotary or school clubs or their civic groups and faith-based groups that we have in our community. So I think you can gain those work ethic and show your initiative in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And that's, I routinely have high school kids that come back and coach as junior coaches in our program. And I give them a resume bullet. I'm like, absolutely put me down. And this, you may not be getting paid for it, but this is work and this is growth. And this shows when you come in as an assistant coach or a junior coach, it shows that you have, one, the willingness to be taught, and two, the willingness to work on a team as a lower member. You don't have to be the big boss. You can be the guy that's down at the bottom taking direction and doing what you need to do. So absolutely, it's a key component of showing that initiative, like you said, and growing. And all the school clubs, man, there are so many school clubs now that have opportunities, and Yelm's FFA program is phenomenal. Great opportunities across the board that people can get into. Welding, home shop, small engines, large engines, auto body, just those different types of skills and different types of knowledge go miles when it comes to the real world.
You know, you talked about your business and your, went in and got your education back in the business administration. And then you also talked about the Microsoft Office skills and having certification in that. Do you, when you're looking for an employee, look for those types of things, like walking out with a certification out of high school? And how do students make those connections? How should they be looking at that?
I absolutely. I think the biggest, at least in the business world, everyone is almost everybody uses Microsoft Office. So having knowledge of Microsoft Office is critical. If I've got someone that I'm looking to hire for an internship or something along those lines, and they've got no knowledge of Office products like Word and Excel and PowerPoint, they're at a disadvantage to somebody that does. And then where it gives you another leg up is when you have exposure to things like Google Sheets and Google Docs and some of the other platforms that might be out there for business tools. Like I said, we work a lot in Google, so I focus a lot on what Google does, but we do a lot of exporting documents, things that Google can't necessarily do. We pull those out, we put them in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, and then put them back in Google so that we can share them and work, because we don't have the cloud, the Office cloud software, but we use Google for our cloud software and collaboration.
Well, very similar to school right now. So that's a great
absolutely
way to see that it's real. I mean, we're doing stuff that's really happening in the real world and skills that they get to transfer when they move into their next level of education and training.
Definitely. Absolutely.
That's great. I think that's reinforcing too. I mean, it's reassuring that they're doing something that has meaning and has value as they continue forward.
Well, and if you end up going to college or you end up going to a trade school or something along those lines, I think a big aspect is finding, when you're not in school session, finding work and finding ways to apply your skills. I see education in school as sharpening the axe, right? If we're all lumberjacks, education in school is sharpening that axe. And everybody, you got to have a sharp axe, but it doesn't do you any good to just have a sharp axe sitting there. You got to be able to swing that axe and cut some wood once in a while as well. So putting that axe to work and knowing how to use it is a key component as well. So if you're going to college and you're not going to school in the summertime, don't take 3 months off and do nothing and sit around and do nothing. Find something to do some work and find a way to chop that wood, so to speak. You got a nice sharp axe that you're coming out of the year at school, go chop some wood for just some euphemisms or correlations there.
Yeah, no, those are great. I think you have actually, I mean, I look at it as my bag of tricks or my bag of tools, and it's like, you can connect them all. Don't look past any opportunity to gain a skill or to take on an opportunity. It's kind of what I've heard you say. I was going to ask you a question. Well, I'm going to ask you anyways, and if there's something you wanted to add into this, and as we get ready to close here, looking back, if you were a senior today, and I know you have seniors getting ready to enter the world right now, what advice would you have given yourself as you look forward and say, what would you do? Or what would you tell yourself as a senior getting ready to go out there?
I think I was a rebellious teenager. My dad and I didn't necessarily get along. My dad's goal, I had a sister that was a National Merit Scholar. I had a brother that received a 4-year ROTC scholarship to the University of Washington. And so the expectation for me upon graduating high school was, you're going to a university and there's no two ways about it. So the Army was rebellion for me. I joined the Army out of rebellion to my dad and said, no, I'm not going to college. As a matter of fact, I signed on the dotted line and I enlisted in the Army, and I'm leaving and I'm going to Korea. And at 18 years old, I was in Korea for a year. So I don't know, looking back and having the knowledge that I have today, um, it would just be stay driven and don't quit. Um, but I've got an elliptical out in my garage, and my 21-year-old daughter, who's in college right now, a graduate of Yelm High School as well. So there's a sign up there that she wrote years ago, and it's still up there, and it says, "You try, you fail. You try, you fail. But the only true failure is when you stop trying." And I think that carrying that message to any senior or anyone graduating, or if I was to go back and have a conversation with myself at 17, 18 years old, just graduating high school, it'd be don't quit. Continue, fight the fight. Hard work pays off, and just keep at it, and have goals, and shoot for those goals, and don't let anything stand in your way. That's I think the best advice that I can give any senior, anybody that's graduating, anybody that's getting out there. It's not the end. The high school isn't the end by any means. If anything, high school is just closing one door and opening up another, and launching down into a new adventure. And don't quit, and have drive. And then I guess if you feel like you're at that point where it's quitting time, ask for help. Go talk to somebody, and try something new. So I think that's the best advice I could give.
That is awesome.
It's short and sweet. There isn't a lot of whole story behind it or anything, but just don't quit.
Yeah. Don't quit, and ask for help. I think that is a huge piece of advice, that we aren't in this alone, that you have people, mentors, and resources out there. And that's actually that many of you have been doing. And these interviews are great resources for people to hear other people's stories. So I thank you for your time. And if there's any last words you have, otherwise I'll let you get back to work.
I would just say, while I say that this isn't the end, and high school is one door closing, never forget that you can always go back to your high school teachers. I still, at 20 plus years out of high school, I still talk to my high school teachers and high school principals that I had about guidance and what's going on and what's next. So those connections that you've built now in school, or are building in school, are lifelong connections, not just with your peers and your friend group, but with those staff and those teachers and those mentors that you have. They'll always be there. And as you grow and graduate out of high school, and you might get a Facebook friend request from a teacher, or you might have a teacher's phone number to have a conversation with them. They're there as resources. So when I say that, ask for help. That's a ideal spot for you to turn, because teachers are teachers because they love to teach, not for any other reason. They're not there for big money. They're not there for notoriety or anything like that. They're there because they love to teach, and they're lifelong teachers. Every teacher that I've met is a lifelong teacher and never quits. So recognize that, and understand that, and love those relationships that you have, and keep at it. Again, don't quit. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, that's a wonderful message. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. And it was great to get to know you a little bit better.
Likewise. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.